from all the cities in Mexico, maybe to the rest of the countries. But it has to do with education, I think, something like this. And I think the approach that I want to talk about it has to do with that, with the education of the city, the way of living the city, of approaching to the city and the urban environment, and the things and circumstances that are surrounding all this. It's not the same a city that has like 5 million people like Monterrey, around more or less 5 million, or Mexico City that it has like 18 millions of people, right? And I think that we have to learn to coexist with this magnitude, no, of people.
Sure. And I wanted to talk about, I'm going to be relaxed in terms of the questions and let the conversation flow, you know. But a reflection of the concept of public space and public value, because I think particularly in Monterrey and the cities that are close to the US, for decades, we've seen the American cities as a model of what a good city should be. And I think that has been very problematic for us because, you know, like this highways model and this car-based cities and these sprawled cities where everything is far away. It has been a big problem, not only to the functioning of the city, but in the very concept of what you value as a citizen, or what you value as a inhabitant of the city. And I think that's a fundamental topic to approach.
Yeah, I think that it has to do what you're saying. We have a different history that the center of our country has. Right? We are a new city,
yeah,
kind of. Mexico City, it has like 500 or 600 years or 700 years, something more or less. We have our oldest building, it has like 150 years. That it's the old house of the governor. Right? In Spanish, it's La Casa del Campesino, right? And the house of the bishop, el Palacio del Obispado. But if you look at the pictures of the old city, we have a tram, we have the trees in our streets. We have
a lot of squares.
Huh?
A lot of public squares too.
Yeah, of course. But the development of the city, which has been in an accelerating rate lately, not necessarily it's connected to the way of life that we want or we desire or we aspire, maybe. I think that we need to start a dialogue in which the parts of the developer, of the authorities that have this way of planning, we have to get together with the aspiring city that we want, right? We can find a middle point, so where we can have an enjoyable city.
Mm-hmm. Great. Good.
Well, it's a great introduction. So we're going to start. We are having still issues with Facebook Live, so we are recording this call for the ones that can connect, can see in the social networks. Yeah. So thank you, Gilberto. Thank you, Manuel. Thank you from Impact Hub Stockholm. And welcome to this a little bit talk about this and how wanna build new cities or how rebuild these cities. So I give the word to Gilberto, who will be the moderator for the questions. Please write in the chat and I could pass to the panelists. So Gilberto.
Great, we're live now, Cesar, right? Perfect. Well, welcome everyone. Great to have you all here. I'm Gilberto Miranda. I'm a political scientist and public communications consultant. I'm not an expert on urbanistic or architectural themes, so be kind with me to our panelists. I'm just an aficionado and a concerned citizen in these topics. I'm also a political analyst for several media outlets here in Monterrey, Mexico, in northern Mexico. And we hope this dialogue will bring local perspectives on how to create a more sustainable city and a more inclusive community. Among many issues that we'll be talking today, we seem to be living in a time and an age that faces two fundamental challenges. One is stopping global warming. Everyone and every country, every citizen has this concern. We are in this together. And two, creating more equal and fair societies from a sustainable approach. I think those are like the big umbrella issues in this day and age. And of course, the advances and realities are very different between countries, but we can learn a lot from a comparative perspective. And we strive to make our cities places of opportunity, platforms for improving our quality of life in every sense. So I'd like to welcome our two panelists, Ida Maria Classon, architect in Landskapslaget. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that right. You'll tell us, Ida.
Perfect.
And she's based in Stockholm, Sweden. Yeah. And also Manuel Martinez, founder of Taller Arquitectónico, who is based here in Monterrey, Mexico. Welcome, guys. Great to have you here. And Ida, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and the impact you make?
Yes. So I'm an architect, urban designer working in the Stockholm district in Sweden. And so most parts of my professional time I spend with dealing with social issues of urban development. And besides designing in new areas and develop the city in that sense, the social issues and engagement of the community has been a big part of my work to find ways of doing that better, since I think that is something there's a discrepancy between the local neighborhoods and the community and what planning are pursuing in Stockholm. And the last year I have had a break from that and have been working on commission for the Swedish government on finding ways for what the government can do to enhance social sustainability. The Swedish government are now working hard on following the Paris deal and also find ways for the whole sustainability subject to be a part of their policy making. And they wanted to know what is happening in urban development in Sweden when it comes to social sustainability. And so I was working on that and giving suggestions on how they can go through with and enhance that topic. So my perspective for the last year has been on a policy level, but otherwise I'm also working on the design level.
Excellent. Thank you, Ida, and welcome.
Thank you.
Manuel, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Manuel Martinez. I'm an architect from Monterrey, Mexico. I was born in Mexico City, but all my life I have lived in the north of Mexico. I think this is important because there is a different dynamic in the cities of the north of Mexico than from the center, like the capital, or the south. There is a different dynamic, maybe because we are near to the US, maybe because we didn't have any earlier cities. We have cities that are developed, that were developed mainly because of the industry, right? So I think this is important. And I'm an architect associate at Landa Martinez Arquitectos, where we develop big projects. And also I'm the founder and director of my agency that is called Taller Arquitectónico. where we focus mainly on educational and cultural projects. We develop community centers, we develop schools, universities, and also we are interested in projects that can have a social impact in the city, and we develop them projects kind of we have this Ciclo de Cine Casa, which is a film festival, an architecture film festival, so it's kind of complicated, and where we have movies about architecture, where we invite the directors and show them to the community for free. And maybe later I'm going to talk about it. And we have also this project that I have to say is not a personal project. It's a project that we started, but it's a collaborative idea with architects, students of architecture, friends not related to architecture, and it's called Diseño de Monterrey, Monterrey Design, where we develop ideas and projects to take advantage of the existing infrastructure of the city to make hospitals, to make public spaces, to renew the streets of our city center, ideas that we can construct to not to destroy and rebuild, but to build over and taking advantage of the circumstances that we have right now. And yeah, something like that. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you, Manuel, and welcome.
Thank you.
Well, guys, the first topic at hand is the opportunity areas, or where we can find, like Manuel was talking right now, opportunities to make a more sustainable city. That's our first topic. I found a Jan Gehl quote that I like, that he said, "An endless number of green buildings don't make a sustainable city." So I was wondering, well, what does? And what does from a systemic, from a structural perspective? And my question for you is, what are the principal mistakes that we make today in urban planning nowadays that prevent or block advance toward more sustainable cities and communities? That would be my question. Ida, do you want to go first?
Okay, thank you. I think that's a really interesting topic to discuss, because there are a lot of dynamics within the planning field, or in the architecture, or in the systemics that are having an impact on how what is coming out of there. And I think from a Stockholm point of view, or a Swedish context, I would say I would sort of list three things that are very important for this topic. And one of them is that when we are in a planning process of doing architecture, or developing new neighborhoods in Stockholm, or other parts of Sweden as well, we work in project groups where the dynamic is that we make short-term decisions that are gaining us in a short term, not in long term. So to have a good budget for the project is better, that are gaining us better than having doing architecture that is good for long term. There are, of course, people trying to come out of that, and example life cycle analysis and things like that. But on the social side, it's a lot harder, and we haven't come as far in that sense. So I think that's very interesting, just on how is a budget for a project made, and what are our goals within the project, and who are the decision makers, and what roles do we have? The architect, we have the project leader, we have what are the engineers, what are our different goals. And So, and then I think within the concept of sustainability, even if we just focus on that, there are a lot of goals of conflicts within that topic. And that are also supposed to be dealt with within the project. And that then there is, so we have to deal with the economics, we have to deal with the environmental issues, and we have to deal with the social issues, and how, when they are in conflict. In Stockholm, it's very usual, we end up in conflicts between the environment or the social. And how can we make decisions on that, and how it's really hard to sort of cut out things from a project, and sometimes we really have to put our hands down. Now we decide on this and go further like that, but then we have to put other things aside, and often we do that because of there are lawmakings or economic things that makes us take these different decisions, and it's not always for the best of social sustainability or for the local engagement or the topic of this panel. So I think that is a real issue that we are dealing with now, how we're going to do perform a sustainable city without, because we can't say yes to everything. And that is really hard for our profession to, and I'm not sure that every one of us have the knowledge on how to do that, and maybe not even that we want to. I don't know. Am I making myself clear?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, and everyone has different agendas as well, and whose agenda is on top of what we are planning for. So that I would say are, and that is on a very general policy level, of course, but it also, but in the project groups in Sweden, at least, that's where the sort of the architecture is laid out, and the design decisions are made, and those decisions will, I mean, the buildings that we're performing, we want to stand there for, I mean, 100 to 200. In Stockholm, we have buildings that are 200 years easily, but what we are building today would not stand as long.
Yeah. Good, thank you, Ida. I find that very interesting, and I think that that hits a nerve. The fact that the interests clash, and where is the public interest, and where's the private interest, and where's the middle ground, and you know, the fair amount of interest or agendas between all the stakeholders involved. I think that's very important. Manuel, will you tell us your thoughts on this? What are the principal mistakes we're making in urban planning today that are blocking the development of more sustainable cities?
Yeah, sure. I was hearing Ida, and it doesn't sound that different, Monterrey and Stockholm, right? Maybe they are like universal problems, right? In a different, we say in here, tropicalization, right? In a very particular way of to each city, but maybe they are like universal problems. I was thinking about this question. It took me a couple of days, and I thought that, of course, there are problems a lot. There is like a disconnection between the city center, the peripheria, also we have the scars of previous planning interventions in the cities. We have a fast rate of developing, and I think there are lots, right? Maybe not problems, but circumstances. I see them. But what I thought is that maybe we have like a medullary circumstances from which other ones derive, right? And it has to do with education in Latin America. We are building and rebuilding our city in a very fast rate that not necessarily it has it has a connection with the actual problems. Of course, we also have the short-term planning. There isn't any planning since, I don't know, since the 50s or 60s in our country or in the city, where we can attend the problems of the future. But I think that the most important problem to have a more sustainable city, it has to do with education about the importance and the weight of the city and the urban environment and the interaction that we have with it. Sometimes it has to do with common sense, I think. But maybe sometimes we forget that we can have a street with big sidewalks or with trees or an efficient public transportation system. Or maybe it's not only one, it's a couple of them, right? And but as a planner, maybe you know it, but the people who use it, maybe they don't, right? I think that if we show them the possibilities of a more efficient city, they will ask for it to the developer, to the authorities, to everybody, right? And it can detonate a dialogue in between all the parts that coexist in here. So
Great.
in a simple answer, education and a lack of dialogue.
Yes, and those two are very, very well connected. And I remember that old Latin American saying that common sense is the least common of the senses. No, we
Sometimes.
say that.
Also, there is this thing that there isn't any more permanent thing than a temporary thing, right? And it happens in the city that they make a solution or not a solution, something to stay for a couple of years, and it stays forever. And that develops or it transforms itself into another problem, a bigger problem, something like that,
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, totally. A friendly reminder to our audience, if anyone has any questions, please send them to the chat of the panel. Let's move the conversation to the importance of local movements in order to create a more sustainable cities. And I'd like to know, in your local experience, how does sustainable city planning becomes public agenda? We were just talking about like the different agendas that collide or that coexist in projects. But how do we make sustainability public agenda to governments, to the media, to NGOs, to the broad public opinion? How do we generate the interest to spark change? And with that in mind, what local movements are taking place in your local context as a response to have a more sustainable city, would be my question. Ida?
Well, I had to think a lot about this question about local movements in Stockholm actually before when I prepared for this seminar, and because I should say I have never been to Mexico, but I have my most international experience with planning is within the US, and so to compare Sweden to the US, a lot of in the US, a lot of local engagement and takes place within the communities, with the NGOs and from different initiatives that are taking place. But in Sweden, we have a very, or had at least a very strong welfare where a lot of these matters were taken care of already. So in that sense, we don't have that kind of local movement coming from the community, but we have all these things are sort of built into our bureaucracy system. I don't know how to say, but so when local movements occur, it mostly are when a community wants to protest to something that's going on. And for example, we have had a lot of activists and groups when rental apartments owned by the city, for example, are planning to be sold out to a private owner or to becoming condos or something like that, whereas when someone else can gain money from someone's housing, people tend to go together, for example. But also, of course, a lot of urban engagement is happening in Stockholm, and like urban gardening or whatever that is happening around the globe. We also have climate strikes and things like that. But in our planning process, that is in Sweden, it's very regulated how that will be conducted, and within that we are there is sort of built in to speak to the community and to start an engagement. But it's with our law is describing this in a way that planners are interpreted in a very bureaucratic way, or maybe planners don't know how to do that without making it very bureaucratic, and it sort of makes a disconnection between the community and the planning and where the decisions are being made, and that's, I believe that makes communities then tend to sort of not have trust in what's happening, what politicians are making decisions about, or how the planners are they really planning our neighborhoods development for our best, or questions like that are raised. And in my field, we sort of, now I work at a privately owned architecture company, but we are often hired by the city to sort of be out there and talk to the community and engage them and doing planning together. But it's really hard, and it's a lot of the times it's very let's say that we have to do it within a project again, and it's we go there and talk to people and we start to build up relations. But then the project ends and we are out of there, and then there's a new project and new people come, and this will be repeated all the time. It's no continuous dialogue between the decision making and the neighborhoods, and so even if we have it, local movements, and we try to incorporate them within the planning, it's really hard to make that very genuine and not just you know, for show, so to say. So that's a little bit sad, but we are, for the last 10 years, it has been a really huge discussion on how planning can be more inclusive in that sense, and we are making progress for sure. And there are many good examples on that in Sweden, but there are also many bad examples, unfortunately.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Ida. A lot of interesting thoughts in what you just said. You know, I was remembering last year I was in Copenhagen to visit friends, a Mexican friend who is married to a Spanish friend. And they were telling us that they were very lucky that they could buy an apartment that was built in 1922, a building that was built in 1922 by state money, whose goal was not to make a profit, was to give people, you know, dignified housing. And that model, that they told us, it's almost disappearing. So it's also a broader issue here. What's the logic behind urban planning, behind housing projects, and it shouldn't always be profit. You know, I think that that's like a broader issue at hand.
That's a huge issue in Sweden and especially in Stockholm right now, that we used to had a lot of housing that because housing was a human right, so to say, and it's the city's responsibility to take care of that people have somewhere to live. But that has been put on the market, which has sort of really rapid changed the whole scene for the housing, and now it's really hard. And even now companies like Spotify, for example, they have trouble finding employees, because you can't really find an apartment in Stockholm if you come just for a year or something like that. So it's really a problem for everyone, even for people who have money. So yeah, that's a huge issue.
Yeah. Well, Manuel, what are your thoughts on local movements to you know, as a response to have more sustainable cities?
Yeah, of course, the housing is the main problem. You can see still the housing projects in Mexico City from the 20s or early 20th century, and you are amazed of the quality of the space, of the construction, of the planning, and
the size, that spaces.
The size, of course, the height. Yeah, but as a local response to this of the community, I was thinking, and there are intentions, right? There are people who have started different kind of movements. There are these guys, which it's a friend that passed away recently because of COVID, Eduardo Quintanilla, that started a movement that it's called La Banqueta Se Respeta. And I think it's very important to mention him, because in Monterrey there is a lack of good sidewalks in the city. And he started with this idea to improve the quality of them, but from the point of view with the same idea of the educational part with the community. So I wanted to mention him. Also, we started this film festival that it's called CASA. CASA, it's like an acronym. It stands for Community, Architecture, Society, and Aprendizaje, which in English will be learning, right? So we started.
And it means house in Spanish, casa, right?
Exactly. That was the idea. Casa as in house. More not house, but home. You know, there is like a different connotation between a house and a home. A house is a place where you live, but home, it's your place where you live. It's more a kind of a personal connotation, right? So this, from the idea, it's from the Renaissance, okay? So the architect Alberti, Leon Battista Alberti, used to say that our house, it's like a small city, and the city, it's like a big house, right? It's everybody's house, okay? So this idea we started to bring to the city, to different public spaces, public parks, public plazas, a auto mechanical workshop, to bring directors, Mexican directors, to show their work, mostly documentary films. And the thing about documentary films, it's that the director, he doesn't have, or she doesn't have like an economic interest in this. So they are people that are so involved in such a personal manner with their work that aside of showing you a perspective or a story, they can express it in a more personal way, right? So we have showed a couple of films. One of them, that I want to talk to you. It's called, it's by this female great Mexican director called Itzel Martinez del Cañizo, a good friend, and it's called El Hogar al Revés, Upside Down House. So this film, it takes place in Tijuana, which is in the north of Mexico with the border with California. And it's a city, it's a very dynamic city, even maybe more recently with the immigration that takes part in there. And it's a city that is composed with the big developments in the periphery. So what happened in these developments that are in the peripheries of the city is that the people that lives in there, normally they have to take a public transportation that it's not very efficient. And they take trips, maybe 3-hour or 4-hour trips to get to their working place, staying there for about 8 to 12 hours, and then take another trip, 3 or 4 hours to their house. So the people that lives in their houses, like the kids, or maybe the elder ones, they grow up alone. So this is a red spot for a lot of problems, like house abuse, crime, right? So this film shows the reality of these cities. And even though it's in another Mexican city, here in Monterrey, we can relate with that, right? So the idea of showing these kind of films, it's to tell the people that this is happening not only in our city, but in a lot of them. And the most important thing is that they show this reality, but also they make you to question, why do we live like this, right? That's one film. Another one that it's really cool, it's called Nadie es Inocente. So in English, it will be Nobody is Innocent. And it takes part in Mexico City. Well, it's aside, it's in a municipality called Ciudad Neza, to the east of Mexico City. And it's by this female director called Sarah Minter. And it shows, it's in the 80s. And it's a very aggressive urban environment. And it's the story, it's like a fiction documentary, thin line between them. So it's a story about these kids who grow up in this very aggressive environment, and not aggressive because of the people, but because of the infrastructure, the lack of planning, right? There are no sidewalks, there are no trees. There is a very dense place. So the point of this film is that when you grow up in an aggressive environment, maybe you grow up with the idea that it's a normal thing where to live, right? So if there is an order in the environment, you grow up with the idea that you don't need order to your life, right? Not in a sense that everything has to be like rigid, right? But maybe it's an organic order, maybe, I don't know. So the idea of this film is that it shows that when you live in an aggressive environment, the human nature of the people in the film, they try to avoid this aggressiveness through different meanings. Very particular in this film, it's through music, through punk music, right? Maybe it has to do with the development of the punk movement in the 60s, 70s in London, in East London, something like that, no? But tropicalization to Mexico City. So, and yeah, it shows that these teenagers try to escape this through this thing. So it's a reality that we have in here also. There are like developments that are not planned with a human sense, and you have a very aggressive urban planning or infrastructure. So people tend to escape this. what we try to express is that we can give a direction to this escape through culture, through the ideas, through the fact that you can question your city. Why is the way it is? No. So all these films, the point of this film is to gather people and to show them these different approaches to the city. So also all of this for free, of course, and we try to make them, I think I was telling you about it before we started, we try to make it in public spaces, not so, we don't want architects to come here. We want all the people that live in the houses, that work in the offices, the kids that play in the parks, right? So yeah, and that way we can show all the people that they can have different alternatives to live their life, not their life, their city.
Sure. And that's a very interesting idea, how to use culture to question your city. I think that's a great idea. And what you were talking about, education, I think it also involves behavior, you know, like a civic behavior. And ultimately, I think it has to do with value. What do you value as a citizen? What do you value as a community? Here in Monterrey, we have been having the problem of closed gate communities. The last 20, 30 years, people have been thinking that closed gate communities is something good for them and good for the city, because they think they provide security and they have their own public, but it's actually private space. But it has been doing a lot of harm because they are very far away. They don't mingle, they don't relate to anyone else. Public spaces start disappearing, and I think it has to do with what we value as citizens. But let's move the conversation precisely to social inclusion. Latin America today is the most unequal region in the world, and sadly, Mexico is the most unequal of the countries of the OECD. We have the richest man in the world and also half the population in poverty, you know, like these paradoxes that are just crazy. But this is a matter of justice in terms of better and fairer distribution of wealth. But from an urbanistic perspective, it's also a matter of public value, of the spaces we share and the benefits we get from those spaces, the public spaces. And with that in mind, what are the main barriers that exist today to have more inclusive communities? Ida, what are your thoughts on this?
Wow, it's I don't even know where to start. It's I don't know. Sweden has been sort of known for being a very equal country, and it's nowadays we are not anymore. We have the fastest growing inequalities in OECD. It start from a low level, but still, it's so it's very concerning to all of us. How and there are so many mechanisms driving that sort of it's so this was one of the issues that I investigated on the Commission for the Swedish government. What barriers are there, and what can we do about them? And within the urban development, that's it. But as soon as you start to ask that question, you have to step into all these other different fields. So why aren't schools in Sweden equal anymore? Years ago, all schools were sort of the same, and kids were getting the same education. This is not the case anymore. So when we start asking questions about why is this urban development not going for a social inclusive direction, people answered us that the school system is taking us where we are today. And when you ask people about the school system, they say the urban development are sort of making us having more unequal schools. And these are two different mechanisms that sort of steers each other. And and it's really sad in that sense, because you realize that it's easy to have that as an answer, but what do you want to do about it? So if you're a politician or that can be responsible for a school system, it's easy to point on the urban development. And if you're a politician answering for the urban development in Sweden, it's easy to point on the school system. So, but what can we do together? And so to be in the same boat and going the same direction is not as easy as it should be, I think. And then there's also earlier in Sweden, it was like say 50 years ago, 70 years ago, it was very common to be a member of a political party. Today, it's not anymore. Local engagement is on a completely different. It happens in different ways now, and not through political parties. But that makes the locals doesn't now have a connection to a political party in that sense that it used to be, and that makes a discrepancy between those who make decisions for the locals and for the locals. So that is also a huge barrier, because it affects how you feel about decisions, and the fact that you feel that you have the power over your own and local environment is affected by that. So that's a few really sad examples on how the Swedish society is developing right now, and which affect how local engagement is pursued in urban planning. As I said before, I think how we do our architectural projects, how they are led, are also a barrier on how we can do better urban development. And not in the commission I took part of, we also found that the knowledge on these issues are not, it doesn't exist throughout the project groups. The people who work with these issues don't have the knowledge, so they don't know that they are making decisions that are not taking us to the social sustainable city, or how to say. And so if you're an engineer, maybe you know how to speak about sustainability because you learned it in policy documents. You can talk about it on a more shallow level, but you don't know actually if your decisions are having that effect. And it's even, I mean, architects, engineers, project leaders, all of us, different professions, we don't have that profound knowledge to know if our decisions are actually taking us where we are saying that we're going. Because everyone is, of course, talking about how we do sustainable cities and how we do sustainable planning and sustainable architecture. But we don't know for sure, and we don't have that deep knowledge, or those who have the deep knowledge doesn't have, they have to sort of constantly defend those issues, and maybe are not the decision makers in the group. So there's a lot of dynamics between all the professions that are taking part of the planning, because it's not only the architects that do the architecture. There are a lot of different people, and also you were talking about the rapid urban development in Monterrey or in Mexico, and I think that is true also in Stockholm. But for a Stockholm context, we have such a lack of housing, and we have to build so many housings, but we have a sort of a slow system, which is good because you have time to sort of actually investigate what you're doing, but it also takes a lot of time to go through. But when you are doing that and really have the pressure, the politicians in Stockholm have really a pressure on making new houses all the time, and it's hard for us to sort of do the sustainability issues on a proper level within the projects.
Sure.
I think other issues are more prioritized, so to say.
Yeah, you reminded me that something that might come as an obvious thing, but it's not. The difference between politics and policy. You know, politics as the struggle of power and the different interests in an issue, and policy as the actual decision making from the authorities, and how this is like a very difficult dynamic.
And it's frustrating because if you work, if you're in the design process, it's very frustrating to have all these different layers. I mean, but it's all have to be, I mean, the architecture that comes out from what me and my colleagues are doing is not going to be better than what the politicians had said, or what the landowner had said, or what the law are making us doing, or everything has to be put together to make a good product, and there are a lot of pieces still missing, I think, to get as far as we want to come. I mean, we have come far, but we have a lot of more things to do. It's also interesting to have to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Aida. Manuel, what are your thoughts on this? The main barriers that exist today to have more inclusive communities and with a sustainable approach?
Yeah, I think I agree with Aida, because there are like different interests in the development of the city, but also there is a lack of maybe the plans for the planning part, right? There is an agenda the authorities have to attend, and sometimes that agenda it's not in symphony with the timing of even a construction process, right? And they ask to a developer for a plan that maybe they don't even need, right? So I think that there is a lack of planning, of studies, that can generate a plan, a plan for the growth of the city. But I think that derives into a process of magnitude, in the same sense of a Haussmannian project like in Paris in the Belle Epoque, or maybe the reconstruction of the London after the Great Fire, or maybe in Mexico City, Tlatelolco. That these plans are a result and are like an imposition over the city, that maybe it's not in the same needs, that don't respond to the needs of what the city really needs, right? So I think that the most important barrier is the lack of dialogue between the community, between the planners, between the ideas, between the authorities. And you can see intentions, like right now in the city, there is a program to refurbish and to redesign some streets, making them more friendly to the public, or to renew some public or cultural spaces. There are some intentions, but at the end, what we need is a dialogue, to open the dialogue, so we can plan the whole city, right? The whole. Maybe you can execute it, or maybe you can approach it through phases or each part, right? But there is not like an idea for a whole city. And I think there was a lot of plans, but since the 80s, I think that's the pivotal point where the city started to transform, not in a orderly fashion manner. I think, yeah, it's about dialogue to get together between all the parts and to listen all of them. And of course, there are a lot of opinions. It's not an easy job to do. There are a lot of opinions, a lot of intentions, a lot of ideas, a lot of interest, but we can get together to find a middle point where everybody can win. It's even a better business. It's a better to have a better city, right? Yeah, I think that is the lack of dialogue between all the parts. Of course, in Mexico,
Good.
in Monterrey and in Mexico in general, there is a lack also of the economical resources, right? But I think that in any city you have that, no? But if we plan it, we can organize the city to which parts are the most needy, or in what way we can work them out.
Good. Thank you, Manuel. Well, I find that there's a big coincidence between you and Ida and in the issue of dialogue, and I would add dialogue and with agency, with the capacity to push an agenda or to be heard from the different stakeholders, because sometimes we can come together to a table, but the real power dynamic is not the same. It's not the same agency every stakeholder has in that conversation, if that conversation happens. So guys, I wanted to ask for you, like for some conclusions or closing remarks, because we still have like 15 minutes to take questions from the audience, and I'm told they can make it live. You don't have to write them. You can express them directly in the chat, I mean in the video conference. So Ida, some closing thoughts?
Well, yeah, it's interesting how many similarities we have, and also it would be I want to go to Monterrey now, but I thought about this with and the way of using culture to sort of make an impact, and that's really well, in Stockholm, I think that would be on the agenda now, how to sort of include culture in the urban development, and to make awareness, because there are so many things happening, and people don't understand what's happening, and maybe they don't care because it doesn't really affect you directly right now, but in the end, it can affect you in 10 years or something. And the lack of housing in Stockholm, for example, is affecting everyone, even if you have an apartment or not. So how to use culture for this is, culture is a really huge sort of power to use as well, and a way to reach people, in a sense that that planning and the city has a hard time to do. It's a way of getting together that is unique, and the planning process doesn't really contain that today. So finding ways of putting these together, that would be very useful, I think.
Great. Manuel, some closing thoughts? Thank you, Ida.
All this, listen, I like to imagine I like how the ideal city. I like the city that Carlos Fuentes talks about in his book Aura, the great Carlos Fuentes. I like the Paris that Julio Cortázar talks about in his book Rayuela. the Argentinian writer. I like the imaginary town that Gabriel Garcia Marquez talks about in 100 Years of Solitude, the town of Macondo, right? I like the Los Angeles that Bukowski talks about in all of his books. I like the New York that Kodak describes. So I like to imagine that my city can have this impact, this positive impact in all the people, right? So in order to have that, we need a more positive city, a more plural city, a more diverse city, where everybody can live and live a good life, right? In the streets, in their house, in their work, in their office, in their cafes, in their bars, everywhere, no? Where we can detonate a better life, a better imagination, right? And I think it's something that you can start, and then afterwards, it keeps running for itself, right? Like New York, like Mexico City, like Paris. I'm sure that Stockholm also, no? With the problems, of course, and we will have new problems, but also we will have the capacity and ability to create new solutions, right?
Excellent, Manuel. Thank you. You want to say something, Aida?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, perfect. So let's take questions. Cesar, if you can help us with that. We'll be taking questions from the audience.
Sure. We have a question from Kathy that said, how do people in Latin America feel about only taking investment from Blackstone, which displaces people and contributes to burning down the Amazon? So what do you think?
Can you?
I don't particularly know the case. Go on.
No, but can you repeat the question? Sorry.
See, how people in Latin America, I mean more for Manuel and Gilberto, feel about Orly, this company, taking investment from Blackstone, which displaces people and contributes to burning down the Amazon. Yeah.
Oh, that is a big problem. It's the lung of the world. I think that it's a very complicated topic, but we have the technology, we have the intention, we have the engineering to detonate and develop new energy systems, right? You have all the green energies, which is a complicated also subject, but I think that we need to or it should be like an organized movement to work on a more efficient system, more efficient for the world, for the energy consumption also. We also have this problem in the forest of the south of Mexico, and in Chiapas we have this jungle, la selva lacandona, and it's being devastated as of this moment. Or the Yucatan Rivera, the south, in the southeast, where the developments are destroying the natural resources, right? So I think that we can, first we need to talk about it as a country as a whole, and then to organize to develop new or more efficient systems. Maybe we can start with a more efficient city that that consumes a little bit less energy. We can develop houses that instead of using during for 12 hours the air conditioning system, they use it for 4 hours maybe. And it's the union of a lot of solutions, I think, in that sense.
Good. Any thoughts on this, Aida?
Not specifically on Oatly, but I mean, Blackstone has been a topic in Sweden for buying city-owned or communal-owned rental apartments and buying them and earning a lot of money on people's rent and exploring them. So it's a sad development. And their company now, I think they're out of Sweden again. I'm not sure, but while they've been here, their companies have constantly changed names, so you couldn't really recognize them. It's hard to know, to instantly know that it's Blackstone. So yeah, these are forces that works throughout the world. So not only Stockholm, unfortunately.
Yeah. Good. Another question that was for both of you. I'm following up on Manuel's reference of an aggressive urban environment. How can urban planning have an effect on people's equal access to opportunities, and what practical steps can governments do to help close this inequality gap? You want to go again, Ida?
Wow, can you repeat it?
Sure. Well, but basically, like, what can governments do concretely to close this inequality gap in urban planning?
Okay, so I think what I find now in urban planning is that we, as a communal group or a professional group or the politics or society, I don't know what to put in we, but we, whoever we are, we are lacking a bigger vision for what we want to create, or excuse me, and not what we want to create, but what kind of city or what kind of life do we want in the cities that we are creating, or what people are supposed to do there, what kind of lives are we. Sometimes I feel like we're forgetting that people are actually going to live there, and what are they going to do in the meanwhile, and what do we think people today want to do there, and what is the difference, what they're going to do there in 15 years. I mean, the world is going to change a lot during the next coming years, and our way of living is going to change. And that has, I mean, that's what we planners have to think of already now. So I think there, and politicians should step up, I think, and talk about that, have a bigger vision for what people want to do. We're not just going to be, politics has been focused in Sweden now that everyone's going to work. And of course, it's good for people to have work and earn money and be able to have a house and family and things like that. But what else is there going to be? What's going to be our sort of life qualities and those things? And I think we're missing out on those issues. And so I hope that could be something that we discuss more.
Sure. Perfect. Manuel, the same question for you. What practical steps can governments do or take to help close these inequality gaps in urban planning?
I think that we need to refocus on over the direction of the city, of the country, of the place where we live that we want. It's happening right now in Mexico. It's a very polarized, government. One idea or either idea, but it's nothing new in our development as a city. We have developed there have been like cities that have been developed during a lot of different ways of governments and monarchies, empires, and I don't know. The city, it's a universal concept, right? And it has its own direction, its own idea. The government, I think that the government, what it has to do, it's first of all to listen, and to the people who inhabit these spaces. Ida was saying, we forget that sometimes the people lives in the cities, right? You can see the developments in the periphery of the city right now in Mexico with houses and that the size of like 30 square meters, right? Where lives the father, the mother, two sons or daughters, and the grandfather and the cousin and the auntie. I don't know. And the government let the developers to construct these places. We should find this strange, no? And what we have to do is to question everything, question our government, question the developments, question the city, and to tell the people that you can actually question why the city it's the way it is, no? The result of all this, it's going to take us to a place where we can find an answer to all this. And, and I positively think that this will lead us to a more inclusive, a more horizontal city, right?
Excellent. Well, guys, we're reaching our time limit. I want to thank you both for these very interesting thoughts. I'm gonna keep all of them, very interesting ones. But right now, like what Ida said, that we as citizens, we have to look at if something's not affecting you today, it will in 5 years or 10 years. So we have to put an interest and a public eye perspective, public opinion perspective, and pressure on what kind of cities we are developing, what kind of planning is happening. What Manuel said about the use of culture to question and rethink the city and the planning processes, I think that's wonderful. And the key importance of dialogue to create a long-term city vision is also something that you both agreed on. And I think those are three great insights from you guys. And well, and from my part, I just wanted to close by sharing this quote that I really like very much from David Harvey. And it says, "The right to the city is far more than the individual liberty to access urban resources. It is a right to change ourselves by changing the city. It is, moreover, a common rather than an individual right, since this transformation inevitably depends upon the exercise of a collective power to reshape the process of urbanization. The freedom to make and remake our cities and ourselves is one of the most precious, yet most neglected of our human rights." And I love that quote because it marries the fact that the right to the city is also a human right, and we should all remember that. And I don't know, Cesar, if you want to make the closing remarks and thank the audience for their attention.
Thank you, Gilberto. Thank you, Miranda. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Was a very, very nice and learning thoughts that you had. And invite you to follow up in Impact Hub Monterrey. And if you have any doubts, we can maybe share a contact, I don't know, Gilberto, or email. You can write it down in or through me if the audience has any question, particularly to one of them. So thank you. And well, that's all for today. And in 15 days, we're gonna have the next edition of another topic in the same SDG. So I hope we can see you there. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see you. Bye.